kind of worst issue I've seen from bot-related activity over my time working in digital was an auto retailer that we used to work with. But I think we were all about to leave the office. Maybe it was a Thursday and we were going out for a drink or something. Everyone was on a bit of a high. And then suddenly we got a call from the client and, all hell had broken loose.
Hello everyone and welcome to Cybersecurity Sessions, our regular podcast exploring all things cybersecurity. I'm your host, Cyril Noel-Tagoe, Principal Security Researcher at Netacea, the world's first fully agentless bot management product. With the busiest e-commerce period of the year fast approaching, companies are heavily relying on analytics to optimize their marketing strategies. However, our recent bot management review report, we revealed that in addition to stealing user accounts and committing frauds, bots can actually have an effect on these analytics by creating poor quality data. And to explore more about how bots can affect marketing analytics, I'm pleased to be welcoming my special guest today, Matt Wilkinson, who is the head of paid media at 𝗖𝗹𝗶𝗳𝗁 Digital. So, hey, Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me along.
And before we get started, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, so my role here at 𝗖𝗹𝗶𝗳𝗁 Media is to kind of head up the paid media account. So, across search and shopping, a kind of a sort of pretty broad remit of clients. So we kind of have quite a lot of e-commerce clients that we look after. So obviously a really kind of key period for them coming into Black Friday. But even for the kind of lead gen type clients, it's a time of kind of increased traffic, increased competition. So it's something we need to keep a close eye on across the board, really.
And how does this peak, this peak commerce season, the Black Friday and the holiday season affect marketing activities?
I guess probably the assumption is, Black Friday is a sort of bumper time for kind of anyone operating in the online space, but it's very much a double-edged sword from my experience. So yes, a lot of retailers are going to see, increases in sales, kind of spikes in conversion rates, that kind of thing. But, not everyone is the perfect fit for Black Friday. So, not all products are the kind of the frontline exciting products that people are looking for on Black Friday. Not all sites, not all clients are kind of the best fit. So, quite often what you will see as well is that increase in competition, particularly in the kind of display and social space. That extra increase in competition is actually a kind of hindrance rather than a help to a lot of advertisers. So, it just means there's more people fighting for that same advertising space and kind of driving up costs and probably with more enticing, more relevant offers that are going to really pull consumers in around Black Friday. So, it can be quite a challenging time for a lot of advertisers as well.
I guess, and with that in mind, what's your typical advice to your clients around this period?
So I think, again, it sort of depends very much on where they sort of sit on that spectrum. If they're kind of, a perfect fit, if you like, for that sort of Black Friday buzz, or if they're on the opposite end of the spectrum. But, certainly for those that are kind of retail focused, make sure that you're ready really for that surge in traffic. So, make sure that your site is set up to be able to handle that extra traffic. Make sure your budgets are ready, and your kind of teams are ready to sort of respond, that your stock levels are where they need to be, all of those things really. But yeah, on the other side of things, be prepared for rising costs, be prepared for, a spike in CPMs or, cost per clicks or whatever that might be. Potentially be prepared for a drop in click-through rates if, as I say, you're maybe not the most kind of appealing type of business in that Black Friday space. Might be a difficult time. Certainly there's a number of clients that I've worked with where the best strategy for them is to simply turn off their marketing activity from, maybe the kind of week before Black Friday and kind of wait until all of the kind of Cyber Monday buzz is out the way and kind of come back on a few days after that. And actually, that's the most efficient approach for them to avoid burning a load of budget on stuff that's not going to work as well.
So we did a report. We released a bot management review, which looked at how businesses have dealt with bot attacks over the last year. And especially coming to Black Friday, I think this is quite interesting to look at because when we did this, we surveyed over 400 businesses across the UK, the US, kind of large enterprise businesses, and the vast majority of them told us that bot activity had impacted their analytics, created poor quality data. And not only that, but that actually caused a financial impact to them. I think 60% of them said it was a minor financial impact, and 27% of them said that was a moderate financial impact. I was just wondering, is there something you've come across or experienced with your clients?
I guess a large part of this, that sort of visibility and awareness piece, isn't it? I think a big part of the bot issue, the bot challenge, is the bit of the iceberg that's under the water. I'm sure over the years, both myself and clients that I've worked with have kind of, been sort of blissfully unaware of a lot of that. But in terms of what I kind of have seen and I am aware of myself, it's very rare, I'd say, that you'd go into, let's say a client's Google Analytics account and have a kind of look around the data and do a bit of analysis. And, if you're looking over a decent period of time and you're digging deep enough, I'd say it's unlikely that you wouldn't find some kind of weird data anomalies in there of, kind of large amounts of traffic from, unusual locations, or kind of, spikes in traffic over particular times from, I don't know, a certain device or something like that.
I guess it's interesting because there's probably even more beneath the surface that they aren't seeing. But the way I look at it, I kind of see two main ways that bots can impact analytics. The first one, the intentional kind of ad fraud type bots, which are there to kind of generate impressions, views, whatever, to kind of exhaust those budgets. But I guess the more sinister ones is kind of the unintentional ones. So these are just not normal bots, like maybe a scraper bot or a scalper bot that's there for a specific purpose. That purpose isn't to skew the analytics, but because it's there and it's acted in a non-human way, it's actually kind of polluting the data set. And I guess in some instances, you'll be able to see kind of there's a big spike from a location that you don't expect, but other times it might be so ingrained in your traffic that you might not actually be able to identify that over long periods of time, just because there's constant activity. Is that something you've kind of discussed with your clients before?
A lot of this stuff is kind of under the surface. But, also I think there's a bit of a perception that if you take Google Ads, for example, where, a lot of our clients and, most clients' money is spent, they kind of have their own processes, their own kind of procedures for filtering out bot clicks, fraudulent clicks, and essentially refunding the cost for those clicks. So I guess on the face of it, what's the main reason maybe to care about that bot traffic? Or because it's costing us money? It's not costing us money because Google's finding it and giving us that money back, so problem solved. But I guess there's a couple of issues there. One is, how confident can we be that Google is able to find and filter all of that stuff out? Well, three issues really, because certainly from my experience, Google is a lot hotter on this than the vast majority of other places where we might be spending money on media. So how well are the likes of, I don't know, Facebook and LinkedIn and Bing and certainly my sense is that their processes aren't as robust as Google's. But even beyond that, okay, so we might not be paying for it, even if we assume that all of that is being credited back to us. What's that doing to the data? So, we're getting the money that's been spent on those clicks, that's coming back, but that traffic isn't being filtered out of all of those different data points. That traffic will still be, probably feeding into your analytics data, which is then feeding back into your audience data, which is maybe a big part of what you're using for your targeting and driving your results. Certainly an increasingly important area of digital is all of that kind of audience-led side, the kind of, data-driven side that kind of really, really leans on, how good is your data? How valid is that information that's kind of powering all of these bidding and targeting decisions? And I guess it's kind of quite hard to put a value on that impact.
Yeah, and I guess break it down for me a little bit more in terms of kind of that analytics piece. Obviously, you've got the stuff that's coming from stuff like your Google Analytics, but also you've got your your own data? How often is that kind of merged together for organizations?
I guess probably like a few angles to it. So in the kind of sort of more old school approach, if you like, all of that kind of account optimization and kind of targeting and bid management and all of that kind of thing, obviously going back, I don't know, probably quite a way now, actually, maybe going back sort of like 10, 15 years even, all of that would have been done manually. So, in the midst of, let's say a Black Friday period when, the kind of sales are coming in thick and fast, and, there's somebody there managing the account, trying to kind of squeeze the best value out of it. Those decisions are going to be made on that data that's coming in, and that's still the case. But what's happening now is that data is it's real time. It's as that data comes in, that's kind of powering the machine learning. That's powering all of the kind of algorithms that are then making these decisions on the fly. So I guess back in the kind of steam powered age of where all of these things were done by like a person sat tapping away at a computer, those impacts would have been felt much more slowly. Whereas if all of that is kind of being automated and algorithmically driven, and it's kind of dynamically feeding into these audiences, it's happening so fast. And like to what extent are those kind of odd behavioural patterns being picked up and being filtered out, and if they're not, at what point is someone then going to pick that up and respond to it? At what point is there going to be that sort of human intervention, I guess?
Yeah, and I guess because you've just got such a pointed kind of this peak period, and everything is kind of pointing at this one period, you don't really have the time to kind of have that retrospective look over it. Whereas if it was kind of a longer period, you could say, actually, let's look back and see how this is affecting the change strategies. But with Black Friday, especially, where it's kind of this one weekend, you've just got this, it relies so much on the automation there. But in terms of kind of quantifying, I think you mentioned earlier, like how do we quantify this? So one of the questions we asked in the survey was for them to try and estimate what the skewed analytics from bots was costing them as a percentage of their online revenue. And for these organizations, kind of the online revenue was about, on average, 50% of their total turnover. And on average, what the businesses were reporting back to us was that these skewed analytics was costing them 5% of their online revenue, which it seems like a very sizable chunk.
Wow, I mean, yeah, 5%. Has to put that into context. If you imagine a really kind of mature media account, whether that be kind of in the display space or in the search space, if you could get yourself a 5% increase in ROI in kind of lead volumes or whatever that might be, then that will be huge. So to kind of suggest that that's the impact that's happening is it's a pretty significant.
Yes, I mean that 5% is over the course of the year. I'm just trying to understand, if we look at Black Friday specifically, how much more of an impact, or how much more is that 5% felt over Black Friday versus kind of the rest of the year?
Right. Yeah. So I think there's a number of reasons why that impact is going to be more extreme over Black Friday. Any ground lost over that period is going to hurt twice as much. A lot of I guess sort of most retailers are kind of bringing in the vast majority of their revenue for the year is coming in Q4. So Black Friday, Cyber Monday, has now become a pretty significant slice of that Q4 impact. So yeah, I mean, if you're seeing 5% loss there, then yeah, I mean, I guess it hurts just as much as 5% any other time of year. But I guess that 5% can quickly get amplified by, if that's when you kind of run in promotions, if that's when margins are particularly tight, if that's when you've got challenges around stock, I guess pretty quickly that 5% can turn into a bigger problem due to the impact of some of those other factors as well. So yeah, really, really significant.
Yeah, and just And just taking some of those other factors there, so you mentioned, for example, kind of like stock issues, and one of the things that bots have done, especially over kind of the last few years, when we've had like the scalper bots that are going to buy up inventory very, very quickly, and then obviously you've got almost this bot that's buying up inventory, which is causing you a stock issue, and at the same time, just the activity of that stock is causing you this marketing, this analytics issue at the same time, and it's just this double-edged sword that you're facing at a very important time for you.
I guess there's all kinds of things that can go wrong, and that's why it's such an intense period for anyone working in online, but particularly in the retail space. The kind of worst issue I've seen from kind of bot related activity over my time working in digital was an auto retailer that we used to work with. And they just one kind of random evening, I think we were all about to leave the office. Everyone was on, maybe it was a Thursday and we were going out for a drink or something. Everyone was on a bit of a high. And then suddenly we got a call from the client and, all hell had broken loose. And essentially what had happened is, initially they had no idea what had happened. They were basically seeing tons and tons of calls coming through on their sales numbers, and basically the line just couldn't handle it, and had been sort of wiped out. And as it turned out, it was basically a denial of service attack on a number of their phone numbers, to the point that it did sort of essentially wipe out a big part of the business that evening and created all kinds of chaos, which thankfully was sort of resolved in a few hours. I don't even want to imagine the kind of damage that something like that could do to a retailer if that landed around a peak period like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, or something like that.
Yeah, and I guess it doesn't even have to be. So in that case, that sounds like a very intentional denial of service attack. But sometimes it doesn't even need to be that, right? It could just be you've already got this increased load on kind of your website over Black Friday, and then you've got kind of whether the bot is there to cause a denial of service, or it's just there for another purpose, whether it's a scalper bot or scraper bot, whatever. It's also going to be adding to that load, and that is just, I think some researchers kind of estimated kind of bot traffic around Black Friday last year was about 35% of the total website traffic. So that already got that massive increase in volume at an already peak period. And I mean, we did some consumer research last year as well, around Black Friday, kind of just talking to consumers. And I think it was about 58% of them had experienced kind of technical issues going on a website, whether that's slow loading or the actual website completely crashing. And obviously, once you've got these bots causing this extra load, you can kind of understand why that's happening. And then I think another 32% of them were saying that they couldn't purchase items they wanted due to them selling out quickly. And also, when you've got kind of scalper bots, that could be part of the reason there. So, I mean, that's just some of the research we've done.
So, what's making up that 35% in your kind of experience? Like, what types of bots are driving the majority of that?
So it really depends on the type of site, really. But for e-commerce sites, you're going to have scraper bots which are trying to do price analysis, especially for competitors or other sites. But then you've got, especially where you've got kind of hype items around Black Friday, where you've got some items that are high in demand, low in stock. You can have scalper bots who want to buy it up and then put those onto reseller sites. So kind of you've already got that going. You might have intentional denial of service attacks as well, that you can take a competitor down, because as you said at the start, there's only so many outlets and so many consumers. If they can't get what they want for yours, they're going to go to the next one. And get that traffic. So yeah, it's a mix of things, but I think just because of the intense kind of period of everyone's coming to shop, and we need to make sure that we, as you said, like this accounts for so much of our forecast for the year, and just these attacks can be absolutely intensified. Coming on to kind of preventative measures, then, I guess in your opinion, in your line of work, what do you think we can do to kind of educate businesses on the risks of bots, like to analytics, but also kind of these other risks we talk about, just the impact on the website load, the customer satisfaction, things like that.
I think, to be honest, just getting some of these numbers kind of out there and more visible, I think they sort of speak for themselves, really. As I was saying before, I think that maybe that 5% needs a bit more context, because you hear 5% of anything, it doesn't seem like that big a deal. But, if a sizable business is losing 5% of its revenue, that's a pretty big deal. And, like 35%, God, of traffic around Black Friday. I mean, these are kind of numbers that become quite hard to ignore. So I think by kind of increasing awareness of some of those kind of hard facts, I think that does a really good job of kind of focusing people's attention on the issue. I guess in terms of preventative, that sort of becomes a bit more challenging. I suppose from my experience, it's more it's more about after the fact. So it's more about kind of identifying those kind of weird anomalies in the data and filtering that out of reporting, or maybe finding ways to kind of strip that out of any kind of audience builds or anything that might be fueling bid strategies and that kind of thing. But I suppose the true preventative side, that kind of that sort of falls in your court, really, doesn't it, in terms of how to kind of tackle it before it happens.
Yeah, and one of the ways I love to emphasize how significant that 5% is to relay it back to something like GDPR, which came out at that the maximum fines there were 2% or 4%, and the absolute kind of like pressure that put on businesses. Like, you saw massive transformation programs for that 2% or 4%, and that here you've got a potential 5%, which is even more of that. I think that really puts into context just how much of an impact this could be. But yeah, in terms of the preventative, I think one of the really important things is for kind of marketing and security departments to speak to each other, because on one side you might have security who see there's a bug problem here, but they're not communicating with marketing, so marketing is still relying on that data. Or conversely, marketing might see, there's this spike here that doesn't look right to us, this data seems different, and then they can relay that back to security as well. So I think you definitely need to have that constant kind of communication and those channels between the two. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, obviously, get a proper bot management place.
Absolutely.
But it's been really interesting getting your perspective on this. But before we wrap up, are there any last thoughts you'd like to share?
I think just everybody have a great and a safe Black Friday, and watch your backs out there.
Great, thank you so much, Matt. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning into this episode of Cybersecurity Sessions. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe and like or leave a review on your podcast platform of choice. We'd love to get your feedback. You can also get in touch with us via Twitter at 𝗖𝗶𝗳𝗁 or by email to podcast@netacea.com. Thanks again for listening. Have a great Black Friday and see you again next month.